Hey, listeners, welcome back to the ValueHunt podcast. And today I'm truly excited to be here with Brent Charleton. He's the CEO of EnWave Corporation. And I'm really interested because this company does some unique stuff. I hadn't seen this business model before. So truly curious to learn from Brent. And why don't you say maybe a couple of words before we start the interview and explain what EnWave does, introduce yourself for the people that might be hearing about EnWave for the first time.
Sure. First of all, thanks, David, for the opportunity to join you today. EnWave Corporation is an advanced technology company that is commercializing a patented dehydration technology combining vacuum and microwave, primarily in the food industry, but other adjacent industries as well, through a licensing royalty business model. So to date, EnWave has more than 50 commercial royalty-bearing licenses granted, a royalty portfolio that has now grown to about 2 million CAD per annum and expected to grow in the future years. And right now, our core strategy is to land and expand to forge as many new licensed relationships as we can and sell as many of these machines as we can to grow this diversified royalty portfolio.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I think that's a great intro. And my first question is, how did you join EnWave, or how did you start in this company? Because it's pretty unique, right?
Yeah, it was I call it a serendipitous entry into EnWave in that I had a short-lived professional basketball career overseas and decided that that wasn't going to be a long-term career prospect. Came back and did I'll call it a finishing diploma for marketing management to layer on top of my undergraduate degree. And the head of the business school at that time at the organization I attended did his master's of economics with the head of investor relations at EnWave at the time, and she was looking for an entry level marketing coordinator. So that is how I entered EnWave as a grunt, a low level marketing coordinator, doing what I had to do to try and create value. First of all, on the investor relations side, given that at the time EnWave had maybe $1.5 million on the balance sheet, was very much pre-commercial and more of a concept than a reality.
Got it. Yeah, that's quite interesting. Actually, I have to ask you, where did you play before leaving basketball? I guess.
I traveled
Um,
to play in both Australia and New Zealand, given that my father is from New Zealand. Hence, I had a passport to go and play down in those leagues. So I played in the NBL and the New Zealand NBL.
Cool, cool, cool. Yeah, always curious about those interesting side quests or side stories. But
It was the main quest for
nice.
a while, David. It was the main quest before it became the side quest.
Yeah, I get you. I'm really interested in this royalty structure because obviously for people that like business, and if you watch Shark Tank and all that, Kevin O'Leary is the king of royalties, and it's always an interesting concept because I never truly understood how it works. So how does the royalty structure work for EnWave, and why do these food companies agree to pay a royalty in the first place?
Sure. So I'll address the latter question first. Why do companies agree to pay long-term royalties to EnWave? And that comes down to the brass tacks of what value proposition does our radiant energy vacuum technology provide them? And it
Hmm.
offers value in several ways. First and foremost, it's more economical than some of the incumbent drying technologies. It's far faster, takes less full-time employees, less footprint in plant, and produces more product on a per hour basis. Second is the qualitative attributes of the products that are produced using vacuum microwave technology tend to have higher nutritive value, flexibility and texture, different formats that will appease to the end consumer. So by providing that high level output with a more economical tool provides for bigger margin realization. And if you can inflate the adoptee's margin, then that justifies a small carried interest in the form of a royalty long term. And so those are the arguments and the work that's been done to model that out for companies before they buy machines and sign royalty bearing licenses. And then in terms of the structure of the royalties themselves, there's three different models that we've adopted. The first and most prevalent is a percentage of gross revenue, typically between 2 and 5%. So every quarter, our royalty partners send us a report. How much did they sell? At what price? And then the royalty calculated, and they send us a check. We have various means to audit those numbers to make sure they're correct. So we feel comfortable with that method. The second is based on weight production. So a company may pay us a set fee on each kilogram or pound of the end product they produce. Or lastly, which is primarily in the cannabis industry, we will arrange for a set fee. So regardless of what they sell the product for or how much they produce, they'll pay us a set fee per quarter.
Hmm. Okay, got you. And yeah, you mentioned right there like food industry and cannabis. So for people that might have not checked your annual reports or previous presentations, can you guide us through who are your key clients as a percentage of revenue and or which industries you serve? Yeah.
Sure. So I can't, due to confidentiality reasons, break down on a per customer or royalty partner
Hmm.
basis in terms of revenue makeup. But in regards to segmenting it between food and cannabis, and then to a very much lesser extent, the biopharmaceutical space, approximately 90% of our revenues come from the food industry, less than 10% from
Mm, okay.
cannabis. And I'll say de minimis, like less than 0.5% would come from test work that's currently being done in the pharmaceutical space.
Okay, got it, got it. Nice. And also, I'm interested in knowing if this royalty structure was always in place since the beginning, or was this something that you adopted along the way?
It was in place when I joined the business 15 years ago, before it was even commercial. This is how the technology was being pitched to the first
Okay.
adopters of the technology. The first one was in 2012 with a company called MicroDried, who is a co-manufacturer of fruit and vegetable ingredients and snack products in the United States. And we're still a very strong partner of theirs to this day. But that was the first initial success, and then it was a slow build up until maybe 5 or 6 years ago, where we really started to accelerate the number of new licensed partners. And it also came to fruition due to the evolution of our technology and the machinery's operating history to de-risk the technology as it was being obviously dispersed throughout the globe.
Okay, okay. Got it. So, for those that might not know, the Rev technology is basically what you have developed and where you have all these cool patents. And so, I'm interested in what's the ultimate ambition? Is it to replace freeze drying at scale or remaining a niche solution? So, yeah, maybe that would be interesting.
My comments in regards to competing with existing technologies is that there will always be certain applications where one technology or the other will be most appropriate. But what I do truly believe is that vacuum microwave technology, more specifically our versions of that, because it is viable at commercial scale, has a legitimate opportunity in carving out a majority of the current freeze dried market, given that we have such strong breadth in applications that are, again, commercially viable. So if we look at the size of how much freeze dryers are sold per annum, which the latest data we got from reporting was close to $4.5 billion worth of new capex each year.
Mhm.
That in itself is a huge market for us to start carving off market share as we go forward.
Got it. Yeah, makes sense. I guess you don't necessarily have to take them out of business. It's just such a big market. Uh, so again, on the royalties, this should be somewhat recurring as far as I'm concerned. But I'm curious to know how recurring are they exactly, and does this give you good visibility on the future, or are these unstable in nature?
Um, Mostly stable. So the majority of our third party royalties being generated right now um, are from accounts that are growing on a quarter by quarter basis. So it's rare that we'll see a company pay a large royalty and then all of a sudden disappear. That's not the case. Typically, we're
Mhm.
seeing progression from all. And through that, an average royalty being generated on each large scale machine that we've sold slowly increasing. So if we say we have,
Mm.
call it 20 large scale machines currently deployed globally, and we generated about 2 million CAD in royalties last year. Well, that's about $100,000 per machine, but not every machine is being used to the same extent. Hence, some of the companies who have lower manufacturing capacity utilization now will likely increase that capacity utilization in the coming quarters, and that overall average per machine should rise. That combined with our pipeline of new potential machine sales, most of which are now probably going to be coming from current partners that just need more manufacturing capacity. So repeat orders. Why is that significant? Well, they already have existing customers. They already have successful products in market. And the follow-up purchases for additional rev equipment from EnWave is meeting a demand. So they simply need more volume immediately. So once these machines turn on, that's instantaneous royalty growth versus slower growth for companies that are launching new products to market.
Okay, and how much of those royalties? I don't know if you can disclose this or not, but how much is from existing customers or new business? I guess maybe just selling like this is more, this is less. So yeah, that would be great.
Well, I mean, if we're talking about royalties being generated, they're all current royalty partners, right? But I'd say in terms of longer standing royalty partners, so more than a year old in terms of the license history, you're probably looking at like 80% of royalties are coming from the longer standing partners versus 20% coming from newer partners who are just getting started up.
Okay, yeah, that's what I wanted to know. I guess it was not properly framed, but also I'm really interested in knowing what's the conversion of these pilot equipment rentals, because if people, I'm not sure if people know about it, but you have some machines in your headquarters or in the US, whatever, and
Yep.
people like companies can go and do pilot tests in there. So curious to know like how much of that actually converts and becomes viable business.
Sure. So we engage in the first stages with different prospects through several different situations, as you mentioned. First, in Vancouver, Canada, we have our innovation center where we have pilot scale equipment, all upstream and downstream complementary equipment to do product development and ultimately produce enough product to do focus group work and or test the market. Oftentimes, when that work is being done with these different companies that we're working with, it is not publicly announced. We
Mm-hmm.
only publicly announce relationships where a company has a desire to rent a pilot scale vacuum microwave machine to place at their facilities for a period of time to do internal process and product development. That's our technology evaluation license option agreement announcements. And so if I were to say, what is the percentage of companies that engage with us that eventually become commercial license partners? I'll say less than 40% right now because
Mm-hmm.
we're just engaged with so many companies. And that's not to say that, a company says, no, we don't want to go forward. It's more so maybe not right now. Maybe they don't have the
Mm-hmm.
CapEx in their budget for this year, but they want to stay engaged and involved and then maybe come back the following year. It's more so just of a timing issue versus the technology didn't quite work for what their application needs are. And so, so great, 40% hit rate. What does that mean? That means we need to drive more pipeline. We need to engage with more companies. And how do we do that? Well, hiring more salespeople and attending more trade shows and being more present in international markets. And that is the strategy that we've adopted this past 12 months in going out and hiring a new VP of sales. We just recently hired a senior sales manager in the Netherlands. We're looking at another one in Asia at this point, and hiring another two Canadian-based mid-level employees to join our team really in the past 4 months.
Got it. Yeah, and I guess you push a lot for that also because of your background, right? So um, makes a lot of sense. Also, I'm assuming this is not exactly a asset light business because obviously it's equipment fabrication. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm curious to know, how do you approach working capital management in this type of business?
So
It's always, I guess, a question.
I will politely correct you and state that we are an asset light business in that we manage our working capital extremely efficiently. First and foremost, we have enough resources in the business to have multiple 10 kilowatt machines in inventory ready for deployment as soon as there is a need or demand from a customer. Second, for
Hmm.
large scale machines, we've now taken up the practice of prefabricating at least one large scale machine to have available for quick deployment, given that it is a 6-month lead time from the beginning of fabrication to a machine being ready to ship and be commissioned wherever the end home may be. That all being said, when it comes to receiving multiple large scale orders, we structure the payments to be a 40% down payment,
Mm.
another 20% 3 months into the commissioning or the building, the manufacture of the machine, and then another 20% before the machine's even shipped. So we're collecting 80% of the contract value, and then the final 20% upon commissioning or 30 days thereafter. And our average gross margin on those transactions is about 30%. So we've already recovered our costs before the machine has even left the facility. Plus, we're collecting cash along the fabrication timeline where we're not exposed in any material fashion.
Mm. Got it. Okay, so this is a non-issue.
Correct.
Yeah, I don't know, like it almost feels too good to be true sometimes, because like first of all people pay your royalty and then they pay up front. Like this is very interesting.
I'll say
Okay.
they're not thrilled about paying a royalty. No one's thrilled
Yeah,
about paying royalties,
yeah.
right? So it really it comes down to the hard numbers. Like when you're doing the calculations and walking them through the business case, it has to be clear as day that there is value to be surfaced if they adopt the technology, and they have to be comfortable with that. Obviously, um, shared achievement. If they do have success in market, that yes, we are going to come along for the ride.
Yeah, makes sense. And you also have very good incentives, right, to make it
We have a
work.
vested
Uh,
interest then to continue providing the best service possible in terms of teaching them new methods to optimize their processing protocols, exposing them to new product applications, which we think might have commercial legs that they can consider. So we want them to win, and in that we'll win as well.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. So I guess all of this, all of your business model, or most of it, is uh, is really dependent on the patents and the technology you have, since this is a technology-driven business.
Mhm.
So how enforceable are these patents globally, and especially in the countries that are well known for IP enforcement? Not wanting to name any, but yeah.
So first of all, we have a very strong patent portfolio, which has
Hmm.
several apparatus design patents, which protect our two core innovations: our basket system, which we refer to as NutriRev, and our tray-based system, which we refer to as QuantaRev. Then we've layered on top of those apparatus patents several process-related patents specific to different verticals where we see promise. Then we file through the international PCT, and all the PCT membership countries will then select after we get favorable results from the initial review and then file appropriately. So we have basically filed in every major country that we would plan to do business in the future. We do
Hmm.
not plan to do business in companies that do not respect intellectual property law or have government that have a history of stealing IP and using it for their own benefit. And we'll continue to act in that regard. So we're limiting ourselves from certain countries. Again, not naming names here, but we won't go into countries where it's either IP threat or personnel threat. Like it's not safe to do business in.
Hmm. Okay, perfect. Makes sense. And maybe for people that aren't in businesses that require patents or never had experience with patents, like myself, can you explain what actionable steps do you take besides avoiding business with these countries that have weak IP? But
Mhm.
uh, do you have a team behind that? Like in practice, what is it that you do to protect these patents and make sure everything is
Yeah. So we do have a long-standing relationship with one of the most reputable IP law firms in Vancouver, who has been managing our account
okay?
for decades, and so are very familiar with this technology and patent filings related to vacuum microwave. So if anything is flagged as being conflicting, then we will take the necessary steps in terms of notifying the counterparties and hopefully vending in their IP into ours. That's number one. Second is it's great to have an exhaustive IP portfolio that has long life to it. And maybe I'll touch on the point that you have a 20-year life to your patents from the date that you apply. If you're successful with that application, then it becomes public domain 20 years thereafter. Our more important apparatus design patents don't expire until the early 2040s. And we've just recently filed for additional patents, which will go, if successful now, until 2045. 100% of our licenses that have been written have terms that state when the last patent in EnWave's portfolio expires, that is when royalty payments cease. So regardless of what patents are active and alive in the patent portfolio, they have an obligation to continue paying those royalties, let's call it hypothetically in perpetuity. And then the second or third part of this is the strength of our contracts. So the verbiage that we've included in all of these licenses before we open our kimono and show them all of the know-how and critical things to do with our IP, we make sure that they are very much commercially incentivized to abide by the terms of that license. And if they do violate it, then there could be significant, again, commercial risks to them in regards to future litigation.
And have you experienced any problems? I guess you had, but any major ones with the patents?
So two scenarios come to mind, and they were quick fixes, thankfully. So first was one of our partners in Europe, very large dairy company. And I know, like, if you have a very large dairy company and different people of all, we're talking multi-billion-dollar company here, not every one of them has read the license agreement. So they don't know what they can and can't do. And so there was a filing for a patent to do with a dairy application that referred to our technology. Our patent lawyers came about this through their monthly searches. And then we communicated with that company in Europe that they were in violation of the license, pointed out the clauses, and then they assigned the application to EnWave almost immediately. So they didn't fight it. They said, you're right. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. Here's all the documentation. Please continue with the application if you see fit. That's number one. Number two is a bit more significant, and that was our former CEO in this business, a CEO that was there when I was in different roles at EnWave. We had to sue him and a number of other former employees civilly through the BC Supreme Court due to allegations that they took confidential information, proprietary information, and began a competing business, in our view, violating several aspects of our intellectual property in a more broad definition. And so thankfully, after 2 years of hard work, we settled successfully in December of 2024. And part of that settlement was a lifetime ban from all of those people to do any business in vacuum microwave whatsoever. The assignment of 2 patents that they had filed for to EnWave, which are now our property. And thirdly, another part of that, which I'm unable to disclose due to its confidential nature, but you could imagine what that might be.
Okay, got it. That's very interesting. I didn't know you could be banned of an industry or business. So
It has to be voluntary, right? So it's a settlement. So this is not a court decision. This is a negotiation for us to stop pursuit in the civil Supreme Court, which could have led to a significant financial penalty to the accused. So rather than risk significant financial again penalty in the future, some of those, I'll say, consolation commitments were given in the settlement.
okay, got it. Okay, I think we are set with patents. This is I guess sensible topic. So maybe we can move into other aspects of the business.
Sure.
And one of them I'm always interested about is operating leverage. So maybe you can guide us through how it works in your business specifically. Does every new machine contribute to the margins, and how much flows to the bottom line, how much is fixed assets and so on?
So if we look at performance in fiscal 24, again, our fiscal year ends September 30th. We're now in fiscal 25, obviously. We had 2 million in royalties, and we'd sold, I think, 2 machines that year. It was a down year for us, 2 large scale machines, I should say. For EnWave to be a cash flow profitable entity, so positive EBITDA, we need to sell 4 large scale machines per year. And that's assuming we generated $2 million in royalties with no increase in that regard. nor are
Okay.
we taking into consideration any other revenues that we'd be generating through after sales service contracts. That's just brass tacks. 4 large scale machines, 2 million royalties. You guys are cash flow break even. You're in a good spot. Anything beyond that, so we mentioned 30% gross margin on machine sales plus any incremental increases in royalty revenue would then add to the profitability of the business. And the current infrastructure that we have is capable of building 10 large scale machines per year if we got orders. So as you can see,
Mhm.
in terms of operating leverage, to be able to build 10 machines versus 4 machines at break even is going to significantly contribute to an overall increase in profitability in the business. And further, as we continue to grow the royalty portfolio and that baseline is maybe at 3 or 4 and then eventually 5 million, once it's at 5 million, it covers all of our expenses in the business, and all of the profit that we get from the more lumpy machine sales plus future incremental royalty growth is going to fall to the bottom line. And that I believe to be in the future a significant milestone and turning point in the valuation of our business is once we can get to that, $4.5 to $5 million royalty threshold.
Okay. And I want to ask you, how are you planning to get to those figures? Say last year was a softer year, as you mentioned,
Yep.
2 machines. What would you need to do to get to the 10 machines of your max capacity? And also in the royalty side, is it more growth on your licensees, or what is it?
It's a combination of both. So as I mentioned, we have
Hmm.
20 large scale machines out there. Not all of them are at full manufacturing capacity there. So there is the ability for the overall tide to rise in royalties and go from like 100,000 on average per machine to more so like 150 to 175,000 on average per machine. So right there, you're looking at hopefully getting over 3 million in royalties just from the current machines deployed, right?
Hmm.
If we're at that rate and we deploy another 15 to 20 large scale machines, then we're going to get close to that 4.5 to 5 million mark. Now, for this fiscal year, we've sold 2 large scale machines thus far. We have a pipeline of many others, and we're hoping again have a minimum 4, hopefully more fully commissioned, deployed this fiscal year. And then into fiscal 26, generating more so 6 to 8 large scale machines. So within the next 2 years, if we're on the high side, call it 6 and 8, that's 14 machines. We're almost there at where we need to be in total number of large scale machines deployed. So within 2 to 3 years, it is reasonable to think that we potentially could have enough large scale machines deployed to eventually generate that royalty threshold, which would cover all of our costs. That's not too far in the future here. And that's what's getting our internal team quite excited because we see the pipeline, we see the prevalence for repeat large scale orders coming. And those are far less difficult sales to close than a new one. Trust me, right? And
Yeah.
so that's how. When we look at the business internally, that's how it's changed over the past 3 years. Is that it was like, okay, bust your behind to try and get one singular license agreement and sign a 10 kilowatt sale, and then it slowly grows, and they finally buy a large scale machine. Okay, that's going to be like a year after that, but now it's like consolidated timelines to additional large scale machine orders, which are far more impactful to our financial performance. And that's what's getting us excited.
Okay. And let's say your capacity now is 10 large scale machines, right? If you reach max capacity in a given year, what type of margin profile are we looking at on a, yeah, EBITDA basis, let's say?
Well, it depends on how much royalties we have in the vending limit between the two. So if we're selling 10 machines and it's still going to be 30% gross margin, right? And that's going
Mhm.
to be the majority of the revenue generated probably for that year, then it's going to be closer probably to like, between 30 and 40% gross margin than anything higher, given that the royalties need to catch up to the amount of
Yeah.
machines that are being deployed. That's in the near term.
Okay. Okay. Got it. Makes sense. And in terms of capital allocation, how has the strategy evolved over time? You mentioned your valuation will
Yeah.
eventually catch up to the new development. So, have you ever considered buybacks, dividends, or
We have
reinvesting
done
in the
that in times
business?
past. We have a program to buy back stock if we think there is an opportunity to do so at depressed valuations, but also considering our strategy in terms of build out of the business, operational execution. And so even with depressed stock values more recently, we've chosen to deploy our capital towards building out the sales team and attending more trade shows to driving the business
Mhm.
versus buying back stock at this time. That certainly is a strategy if we have cash available and the other conditions present themselves to be favorable. In terms
Mhm.
of dividends, that is it's a touchy subject. Obviously, not applicable in the current scenario with the business, but in the future, if we're in a position where we can pay dividends consistently, there are certain shareholders in different countries in Europe that say, no, 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 we get taxed way too strongly on dividends. Please just buy back stock and do it that way. So we haven't made a decision one way or the other. All to say that we have a history of buying back stock, and in the future, we'll consider both options if we are able to do so.
Yeah, I'm happy that I feel represented because every company that pays a dividend is like, please don't distribute.
Yeah,
uh,
exactly. Exactly.
but also one thing that came to mind is what kind of event in the future would require you to raise capital or additional capital in the form of either debt or yeah just equity raise.
Sure. So first of all, like right now, we don't need capital. Our balance sheet
Mm.
is strong, more than enough capital to execute on our growth plans. We also secured at the tail end of last calendar year a up to $5 million credit facility through Desjardins, which is a tier one bank in Canada at very favorable rates. Haven't used a penny of that, but we have it available if we need it for growth. And so in the future, if we were to raise capital, it would have to be directly correlated with a competitor emerging, a legitimate competitor that could threaten our business model. And I think the strategy there would have to be giving the entrepreneur engineer an early exit and either hiring them on an EnWave and giving them payday, or letting them retire and taking their IP and vending that into our portfolio. That would be one situation. And the second, and I don't foresee this happening, is growth, like where we want to have a larger manufacturing facility, or we want to have, not one, but three large scale machines in inventory ready for quick deployment. That I could maybe see in the future, but nothing imminent by any means.
Mm. Okay, okay.
Hopefully the profit off the
So
future sales is going to support that versus having to go raise money, right? So
yeah,
that would be
yeah,
the best
exactly.
scenario.
And at the point you would need capital for growth, I guess that would mean that the business was going really well, and you would have like cash flow to do that. So yeah,
Yeah.
um, let's talk a bit about competition because obviously we've understood clients are willing to pay royalty because it's a very unique IP.
Yeah.
But I must assume there's some type of competition, even if it's from other types of technology that might be less effective. So guide us through what are the key competitors in your market.
Okay. So first, I'd say the incumbents are our most meaningful competitors currently, which is freeze drying.
Mm-hmm.
And then for certain
Mm-hmm.
applications, there's fluidized bed drying, there's radio frequency or RF drying, infrared drying. They all have specific applications that they do quite well in, but it's not as broad as vacuum microwave application. Now let's talk about vacuum microwave companies. There are Chinese companies, a few European outfits, some North American companies who have tried to scale vacuum microwave to commercial output levels. And to our knowledge, there hasn't been a successful OEM who has done so and in a reliable
Mm-hmm.
fashion. We continue to monitor these prospective competitors to see what their latest machine designs look like. But from all accounts, feedback from companies who have engaged with those prospective competitors, didn't like what the end outputs were because their machines didn't work, and ended up coming to EnWave and saying, listen, okay, we kicked the tires of these different outfits and didn't work, so we're okay with the royalty now because we know that your technology is the only realistic option. That's what Dole did. That's what Calbee did. That's what a number of our other royalty partners did prior to entering long-term licenses with EnWave.
Okay, perfect. I'm really curious to know what's the single thing that investors fail to understand about EnWave and this opportunity set. I guess you're obviously suspicious to talk about this, but still interested.
Yeah, I mean, I think first I'll say every investor has their own idiosyncrasies and areas of they focus on within a business. So it varies in that regard. But I think what investors maybe didn't recognize in the early stages of calendar 2025 is that there is no more, call it, hair on our story. As you
Hmm.
look back at our historical performance, we had issues with that operating subsidiary, NutraDried, that was doing a cheese snack that was hemorrhaging cash, and we had to clean up that business, sell the assets, and then set up another royalty stream for EnWave long term. That was hair on the story. We had the ongoing civil court conflict with the ex CEO. That was hair on the story, and people were wondering, okay, well, what if the ex CEO prevails and can actually
Hmm.
compete and use this information? Well, that could be pretty bad for EnWave.
Yeah.
That's been cleaned up, and that's all in the past now. So really, since the beginning of calendar 2025, being in a strong cash position to execute, it's really just about deals. And so, like, the more deals that you see come out from EnWave, it is very clean cut and clear that more royalties will be generated in the future. And so, given that we were at close to a 52-week low within the past two
Hmm.
months, and now we're clipping an almost close to 52-week high, more astute investors are recognizing this and starting to build positions at these more, call it, depreciated values, given that they are also confident that we should be able to operationally execute over the next 12 to 24 months.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, I got it. It's actually a really important part of an investment story is like how predictable the business is, and in this case, you are pretty good at press releasing any relevant information when it comes to new partnerships. Actually, I saw a press release right now, like a
Yeah.
few minutes ago. Couldn't read it, but yeah, happy to
Pet
read it
treat area.
afterwards.
So we have an existing, actually, the company that we sold, the assets we sold that was doing moon cheese, the dried cheese snack in North America.
Hmm.
That company now has an existing clientele of pet food companies that are buying
Okay.
dried cheese to be sold as pet treats. And I looked online, and again, we get a percentage of the gross revenue. The pet treat cheese version is selling for like $16 USD a bag, and
Wow.
the human version is selling for $8 a bag. Half. It's the same product.
Yeah.
So it's all about positioning in the market.
Yeah, yeah. You have a marketing background, so you must understand that better than anyone else. So, yeah, I have a couple more questions here, but I'll have to pick and choose some of them. Could you guide us through who your board of directors is and what expertise they bring to the table?
Sure. Our longest standing director would be Mr. John Budreski. Um, John Budreski came in and helped transformationally change the business in terms of senior leadership. He's been a mentor to me, and he's the person that's given me the opportunity to be CEO of this business, and obviously with board approval. He comes with an extensive capital markets background, working trained as an engineer, and then a very successful career as an investment banker on Bay Street in New York on Wall Street, and has done numerous deals. So, and he's very, very familiar with the royalty structure for businesses. So he's been fantastic. Second person would be Pat Turpin. Pat came to us after we recruited a director that had expertise in the consumer packaged good industry. He was a senior executive at Costco, ex-investment banker, started a snack company called Pop Chips in the US, which ended up selling for a very, very high sum. So like, we're talking hundreds of millions on that transaction. And now he's basically an investor in new emerging snack brands. So he's got his ear to the ground, makes a ton of introductions for us on new projects. Just a great person to have on our board. Next is Pablo Cusati, who again was recruited to join our board as a senior operational executive. He's held the role of chief operating officer at several well-known global brands, including Godiva Chocolates, and is now currently the COO of Sheer Foods, which is a baked food company in the US. And then lastly, and more recently, would be Louise Lalonde, who's ex PwC partner. She's our chair of audit committee. I recruited her through my contacts in the finance industry here in Canada, as our former audit chair, Mary Ritchie, was looking to retire and basically take her foot off the gas pedal and spend more time in Mexico drinking margaritas versus looking at financial statements and attending board meetings. And then finally, myself. I'm the last director to round it out.
Nice. Yeah, it's always interesting to understand who the board members are because I guess the CEOs get both all the good and the bad attention, whereas the board members are more quiet in the background, and and yeah, they are still very important piece of the business, right?
Agreed.
Okay, so last question I have from the audience is, I would also like to understand what is the shareholder structure, who are the biggest shareholders, and what percent of the company does the management team own?
Sure. So we can place, I'll say, approximately 45% of the shareholdings under, call it like 8 to 9 investors, high net worth individuals in Canada, some of which own is up to like 6 to 7% of the common shares outstanding. And then some smaller funds. Some more recent shareholders have come in, owning anywhere between, call it like 2 to 3 million shares apiece. The rest is free float. In terms of
Hmm.
management ownership, it's just under 2%. And so why so low? Well, we've had massive changeover in terms of ownership along the way of building this business. John Budreski, our chairman, is the largest insider shareholder that we have. And then myself and our CFO, both young professionals. As I said, I was hired as a marketing coordinator, making $40,000 a year at EnWave to begin. I'm not a high net worth individual that can make huge investments into the business, but I have invested along the way. And I'm positioned, as well as our CFO, in a very favorable manner in terms of options. So it is incredibly meaningful to me and our executive management across the board, who have all sizable option packages, to make sure that EnWave is successful, because it can truly be life changing for many of them. So
Hmm.
shareholders can rest assured that we all have a significant interest in the future success of the business, and we'll do whatever it takes to achieve that.
Mm, yeah, got it. Yeah, sometimes it's not just about the absolute or the percent value. It's more like, how does that compare to your overall net worth and
Exactly.
your
Exactly.
salary? And
Exactly.
so,
Yeah.
yeah, I feel you. Okay, now I would like to get into more, say, personal or questions about you, not so much about the business. And so I'm curious to know what past experience shaped you the most when approaching running EnWave, and what did you learn from that experience?
I'd say two impactful periods in my life. And the first would be having to move out on my own and be independent, playing professional basketball down in Australasia. That forced you to develop relationships with a myriad of different personalities, and navigate a professional sporting environment, which is very cutthroat and competitive. And that translates well into business. The second would
Hmm.
be my second stint of post secondary education at an institution, British Columbia Institute of Technology, where that particular ecosystem forces you to work with others in every project that you complete and submit. Unlike traditional academic institutions, where you write your paper, submit, and you get your own personal marks. So again, that forced you to work well with others, to develop teamwork skills. Again, translates quite well when you're running a business and having to work with different departments. Those two instances, I think, were the most impactful for me, preparing myself to take on this leadership role at EnWave, which I've been holding now since 2018, so almost 7 years.
Mm, got it. And what were kind of the biggest gaps between what you thought the job would be and what it actually is, when it comes to being a CEO?
I came into it eyes wide open, to be honest, because I was lucky enough to be in the organization for 8 years prior to being appointed CEO. So I was able to observe the relationships, the inner workings, the different departments, and identify what needed to be changed. And also completing my CFA while I was working full time for EnWave. So my financial acumen had increased to the point where I felt very comfortable in the capital market side. So I wouldn't say there's any difference in I expected. I'll just say that it may have been more difficult trying to navigate through COVID and other things that were unforeseen that you couldn't prepare
Hmm.
for. That would be the biggest challenge: the external influences that we've experienced over the past few years.
Mm, okay, okay. Got you. And what were the key challenges during COVID? Because I guess the whole industry, the supply chain was affected and all that. But what did you learn about dealing with the unforeseeable?
Well, we acted in an appropriate fashion in terms of buying a number of longer lead time parts immediately, given that we knew supply chain was going to get crippled, and we wanted to make sure we had enough parts to deliver machines. Which thankfully we were able to sell enough machines to continue operating as a business through that period. Second was being quick to act in terms of reducing overall FTE count, not waiting too long, and making sure we could give proper severances to those that we didn't need any longer during that period of time. That was critical. And then lastly was just the learning that folks wanted to continue to do business, even if it wasn't a global pandemic. So it wasn't like everyone was sitting on their hands saying, we're not going to do anything. No, we wanted to try and still move our businesses forward, but it was just in a different structure.
Okay, makes sense. And now I would like to know who are kind of your mentors and business role models, and why is that? It can be people you know directly or just admire from
From
far away.
afar.
Yeah.
um, so I'll say that John Budreski, our chairman, was definitely and is still is a mentor to me in terms of how he approaches the business landscape. From afar, I'm not sure you're familiar with Scott Galloway, Prof G Pod. I really admire his approach to business
Yeah.
and overall commentary. So he's something that I admire from afar. I would say those two folks sort of come to mind immediately.
Yeah, that's great. I feel like you always can learn a lot about who people are by watching their mentors or who they admire. So that's
Agree.
why I always ask this question. Um, what's a business decision you regret or would approach differently today?
That's a great question. I think the level of flexibility I gave to those employees that left our business that ended up trying to
Mhm.
steal things and compete with us, being nice on the way out to them, I should have been more cutthroat and cut them off immediately from their laptops and their emails, like saying, no, you can't even have an hour to like go and make sure you have all your personal information off the laptop. We should have confiscated that and then done that for them, because ultimately that causes a bunch of headaches for a couple of years. So if there's one
Mhm.
poor business related decision, it would be not being as stern when exiting senior executives if it's not on the best of terms.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Um, what do you want shareholders to understand about your incentives and like how aligned they are with theirs? I guess you already mentioned like your ownership in the business is significant for you and like for other executives. But what other types of incentives you feel you have that align you
Oh,
with
I think
shareholders?
financial is the critical one, given that living in Vancouver is very expensive. A young family needs to support, make sure my kids eat.
Yeah.
That's number one. But number two is that I love what I do and I love the people that I work with. And so I'm incentivized to make sure that not only myself, but my friends who I work with every day at work are also going to have that financial success to positively affect their lives. And understanding that if we all collectively come through and execute and have the hit the mark that we're setting for ourselves in terms of royalties in the short term here, that we're going to be able to celebrate together. So I'm incentivized by the teamwork, the potential success that we have in front of us, and then ultimately the financial reward if we are going to achieve that.
Hmm, got it. So also this is a hard question, but I'm interested in knowing what's the hardest feedback you've ever received from a business standpoint. Obviously, it can be from your board or just team, I guess. But yeah.
Sure. So I'm always very, very honest and open with our board. I don't want any surprises. I never like to sugarcoat anything and build up expectations that are unreasonable. So that's not never been a challenge or negative feedback. But I'd say more so, um, I sometimes can have a tendency to be overly direct and aggressive in negotiations,
Mm.
and some teachings and feedback from certain board members as being like, in certain cases, it's not always the right strategy to be overtly aggressive in those negotiations. Sometimes you adopt a more active listening and calm
Hmm.
demeanor and not reacting or responding in the instant, in the moment, walking away
Mm.
and spending more time to discuss before giving a thoughtful feedback on an intense negotiation. That's been some good feedback and helped me grow as a leader and negotiator as we're approaching more licenses.
Mm. Okay, got you. What are the most proud accomplishments of EnWave that might not show up in the financial statements yet, but you're really proud of, I guess.
Uh, to be honest, navigating the ups and downs and pandemics and failing subsidiaries and rogue ex-executives and all of the drama along the way over this 15-year career at EnWave to get to the point where we are today, which is such a clean story, such a focused group that's working towards a collective goal and doing so with the right tools in place, having the resources that we need that are there, and also a technology which is now mature. It's commercially proven under a model that's proven. And now it's a matter of how fast can we grow it. And I think, the appreciation of all the crap that we went through to get to this point, for newer investors, maybe they don't know about that.
Yeah, it's definitely. I guess people either forget or they want to forget because they got burned in the past, and
Yeah.
then they.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's always interesting when a company hits that inflection point, right?
Agreed.
Um, and also, let's say hypothetically, EnWave fails to meet its potential. What do you think would be the most likely reason for that?
The most likely reason,
Yeah.
I think, would be out of our control, and it comes down to product success in market. So ultimately, we're enabling these different food companies to develop applications where they deem to be commercially viable. And they may start off having fantastic sales and good growth prospects. And then all of a sudden, consumer preferences change. And maybe some of those
Mhm.
products aren't doing as well in market. Hence, royalties might depreciate.
Mhm.
That I think would be one of the key reasons that would be out of our control, where EnWave may not be successful. Because if the products are successful in market, well, that's going to lead to repeat purchase orders on machines, and then it's a clear path to success, our end goal.
Mm. And I feel like you don't have too much power over how successful a product is, besides doing some work on who your customers are and like whether you believe in the product or not. But do you actually try to do that work, or like is it completely unpredictable? Because sometimes there's a very random product that does very well, right?
From a high level, we take a look at different markets reports and where the trends are, and then try to internally develop new applications to present to current and prospective adoptees to then commercialize. But it would be foolhardy to deploy resources internally to try and specifically devise a distribution strategy or a pricing strategy when they're not going to listen to us. They don't care.
Yeah,
They've got their own
yeah.
experts internally who are going to own those components based on their own business expertise. So again, high level trends, yes, but the minutia of an explicit plan to launch a product, no.
Okay, makes sense. And now that we talked about what can go wrong, I'm also deeply curious about what's your 5 year vision, or let's say long term vision for the business where you want to be.
Let's talk about like 2 to 3 year vision, not even 5 year right
Mm-hmm.
now. So we're critically focused on selling another 15 to 20 large scale machines as fast as possible. Hopefully, the
Mm-hmm.
majority of those are coming in a repeat fashion from current licensed partners who are growing their business. That is the immediate goal. Because once we hit that mark, as I said, the expectation would then be hovering around the 4.5 to 5 million in $1 million royalty generation, covering all of our expenses. That changes the game for our business. So that's the near term goal.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond that, once we get to 35, 40 machines, it's like, how do we get to 60? How do we get to 80? And growing the business through different strategies, broader sales team internally, more relationships with third party machine resellers, all the things that need to be in place for faster growth. And so that's where we're heading, and hoping to get there soon.
And so you mentioned basically hitting a certain point of machines and royalties. What sort of metrics would you want investors to keep you accountable or hold you accountable for
Third
in
party
that
royalties.
period?
That is the most critical metric as you see it grow on a quarter by quarter basis, as it has done so for the past 3 or 4 years, is seeing how fast that continues to grow. That's a critical metric. And then, of course, the number of large scale machines that we transact on each year. We talked about four being
Mhm.
that critical number, like the baseline number. Anything beyond that, that's going to provide us with some operating leverage. And so that's what they should look for: large scale machine orders and royalty growth.
Okay, got you. And last two questions I have for you is, how do you deal with or manage stress in avoiding like when you're in downturns or strategic failures? I guess that's always interesting.
Exercise is wonderful. Get on the road bike and ride for an hour, and make sure that you're focusing just about sweating to clear your mind before coming back to the more complex business challenges that you may be facing. So I have a very regimented exercise program, and then also support from family outside of the business environment, making sure that you have a strong support system at home, which I do. And so with those two things, I think you can overcome any challenge, whether it be at EnWave or in another business or pretty much in anything.
Yeah. Okay, I have a bonus question. Do you still play basketball, and how tall are you?
I do not play competitive basketball anymore, given I've had 2 knee surgeries and cannot jump anymore. That's problematic. But I do coach my kids, so I play with
Yeah.
7-year-olds. If that
Okay.
makes sense. I'm 6'6", so I used to be able to get up and do crazy dunks, and I was athletic once upon a time.
Nice. And just to wrap up, how often do you check the company's stock price?
I watch it every day to make sure that nothing dramatic happens in one way or the other. Because if that does, then you're wondering, okay, well, why is it moving and who's selling or who's buying? So I
Uh,
keep it open every day. Just I got to see it every day, make sure what's going on, regardless of what's happening in terms of tasks that need to be completed on the operational side.
mhm. Okay, perfect. I think that's a wrap, and just wanted to thank you for being so generous with your time, and I hope investors learned something new today. So yeah, thank you
Appreciate the
so much.
opportunity to have this discussion. It's been a pleasure.